I will have a couple of pictures of this encounter at the end of the story to share if you're interested. But to begin this story, my girlfriend and I went up to stay at Big Bear Lake in California for a week at a place called Blue Horizon Lodge on Edgemoor Road, located just off of Big Bear Boulevard. The trip was pure bliss aside from a handful of incidents that took place over the course of 4 days, beginning on July 6th and ending in the morning on July 9th. My girlfriend Alyssa wanted to go down to the lake in the afternoon to have a swim before we went out to eat later that day. So her and I walked up Edgemoor Road and headed west down Big Bear Boulevard, and we found a way to access the lake through a mostly empty field. After about a 10-minute walk, her and I reached the edge of the lake where I noticed a white box with a lock on it. She didn't want to go in the water because the place we found was in a cove-like area directly south of Holloway's Marina, and tons of junk and crud were floating in the water. As we were standing on the edge of the lake, I noticed a big white box just sitting about 20 feet out in the water. I got curious as to why there would be a box just sitting out in the water, so I trudged through the mud and made my way to the box, and noticed it had a padlock on it, and I couldn't get it open, so I mostly forgot about the box and went back to the shore where her and I played in the mud and built a little house because she changed her mind about wanting to go in the water. After about an hour, her and I decided we wanted to head back to our cabin and get ready to go to lunch at Azteca Grill. So we put our shoes on, grabbed the towels, and began our walk back to the trail where we had come from. As we walked up the trail, Alyssa squeezed my hand and said, "What the fuck is that?" So I looked over to my right, and I saw a coyote jumping on its hind leg like a kangaroo headed south. I laughed a little bit and told her it was just a coyote, but she asked me why it was jumping like that, and I had no answer. I have never seen a coyote jump on its hind legs as means of travel before in my life, and I've seen hundreds of coyotes in my 19 years on this earth. Alyssa tried to lead me away and began walking down the trail, but I kept my head turned and was looking at this coyote. This is when it stops jumping and turns around while still perched on its hind legs and stares directly at me and continues to hop on its hind legs for a few seconds. After this, it begins to hop in the same direction it was originally headed and goes back down onto all fours and runs off into the brush. The rest of the day went well up until her and I were watching the episode of Beavis and Butthead on the couch, where they're asked to help build a pool in Mr. Anderson's backyard. Alyssa was sitting to my right and I on the left. She turns to say something to me, and I turn to my right to look at her, when I notice a pale figure behind the chain link that was right outside our window, swaying back and forth quickly. I immediately stood up to go over to the window to see what was happening out there, and just as I stood, the figure turns away and runs off into the boat storage yard that was on the other side of the fence. This was about 9:40 at night, so the only light was from the moon. It was tall, extremely tall, pale and completely bald. I'm on the phone with Alyssa as I'm writing the story down, and she's telling me as I type this that she had the urge to not look when I stood up. The next day, July 7th, nothing strange happened, and we had really hoped that nothing else would. Until the 8th and 9th, when it all crescendoed into absolute horror. Her and I wanted to walk down to the nearest marina, Holloway's Marina, to spend some time together before she flew back home the next morning. So we walked the half-mile down Edgemoor Road until we reached the marina. We spent about an hour there watching the ducks and walking along the docks. On our way back to our cabin, we saw a swing set and tetherball pole. We saw there was no ball attached to the pole, only the rope. So Alyssa jokingly said, "You should make it into a noose." So I did. I fashioned it into a very small noose, this is important later, and then untied it, and we walked back to our cabin. For our last night there, her and I wanted to watch The Shining, so she rented it for us on Prime, and we got about halfway through the movie before she wanted to go share a cigarette together. I jokingly tried to scare her by saying that the coyote was going to peek around the kitchen wall and jump out at us on its hind legs. This terrified her, and she wanted to wait a little bit until she calmed down. So we waited another 10 minutes or so, and she said that she needed to put on her shoes in case we had to run, as a joke. So after she got her shoes on, we headed out the door and a few hundred feet north down Edgemore Road, where we stood on the corner of Edgemore and another street. We had our cigarettes. Her and I both say that we felt watched, but didn't say anything at the time because we didn't want to scare each other. I noticed as we were smoking how deathly quiet the area had become. There was absolutely no sound, and it was extremely eerie. I had just finished my cigarette, and hers was nearly done, when from behind us we heard the loudest whistle either of us had ever heard. It came from behind us down the pitch-black wooded road, and both of us felt a gust of wind, and the sound stopped coming from behind us and was suddenly coming from every direction around us and filling our ears. The whistle we heard turned into a guttural growl and gurgle for the last few seconds. It lasted about 7 seconds in total. Her and I booked it back to the cabin and immediately went to the bedroom with our hearts pumping from the adrenaline. We laid down on the bed to give ourselves time to calm down. After a few minutes came a faint tap, tap, tap. These taps continued for hours, moving all around the cabin, our bedroom window, the dining room window, but most of the taps came from the bathroom window down the hall. As we were losing our minds laying in bed, I started to think about the locations where we watched or experienced something strange, and my brain came to the horrifying conclusion that it formed a pentagram with our cabin being the top point. I mentioned this to Alyssa, and this only made us even more frightened. We managed to fall asleep, with all the lights on, of course. In the morning, we were ready to get the hell out of there. As I was taking out the trash for the last time, I looked up at the sign that displays the rules for the lodge's playground, which is right near the dumpster, which is where I noticed a small noose hanging from the tree about 10 feet up. It was not there the night before. We were the only people staying at the lodge for the last 3 days we were there. We hurried, packing and heading down the mountain to get away from all the craziness we experienced. We believe all of these events to be connected in some way. Her and I believe we encountered a demonic entity or a skinwalker of some kind. I'm not one to label my supernatural experiences usually, but I have no idea what else this could have been other than a skinwalker. Has anybody else experienced anything like this in Big Bear? Please let me know. Thank you. Good night, creeps. I hope you enjoyed the story. Don't forget to like, comment, sub, and be careful not to fall down any rabbit holes.